Hello, my name is John Clark. It is Sunday, March 19th, 2017, and we have with us here today for our oral history Mike Shooter. Mike, would you tell us how to spell your name and where you live?
My name is Mike Shooter. The last name is spelled Shuter. I live at 720 South 3rd Street, right down next to St. Mary's Grade School.
And you've been there for quite a while.
I've been there since June of 1962.
When were you born, Mike?
I was born August 30th, 1949.
1949. So that makes you about how old?
I'll be 68 this year.
68. So take me back to the beginning. Your parents lived down in the south side here.
Right. Mother and father, they've finally moved to 794 Ebner Street, which is still in German Village. And I went to St. Mary's School. Now, where I went to first grade at is where the old high school, which was just bought, there was a bank there. That was first grade and everything. Then I went over, they were building the grade school on 3rd Street, where it's at right now. And I went and was dedicated in May of 1955. And I started 2nd grade there. Went through 2nd through 8th grade. Then I went back over to the old building, which then was at the high school at that time. And I was in the last class to graduate from St. Mary's High School. And that was in 1968.
Now, you were at that school as a first grader when it was still probably 1 through 12, grades 1 through 12, wasn't it?
It was, I believe they had it 1 through 8, I'm not sure, because they might have had where they had different classes in there that I didn't know about. And but I know first grade, and then there was one time when I wasn't supposed to go to school, my mother, because I didn't like going to school. And so she pushed me in the door, and the nun that I had, Sister Eudora, pulled me in. But that morning, it was just supposed to be for the girls. So I spent all morning in 4th grade with my first grade books and everything. But then everything was okay, and then went on, like I said, through high school there.
And you've been closely associated with St. Mary's then all your life, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Both the church and the school.
I was baptized at St. Mary's.
What can you tell us about St. Mary's of, say, 45 or 50 years ago?
St. Mary's, the building itself has not changed. And what they're doing right now, what I've talked to Father Lutz about, and they have copied all the things that were on the walls before they started tearing all that plaster down. So once they get everything back and everything, they're going to re-stencil everything so it looks the same.
And this is, of course, is because of that lightning strike
Right.
on the steeple a couple of months ago.
You know, the lightning strike, it happened in August of last year.
Wow, okay.
Because I was in Las Vegas at the time. When I come back, I found out that it was hit. But they didn't think there was anything that much to it. It did knock out the computers, all the electrical and all this and everything. But everything went fine. And then I found out that I was gone again, because I'm in the Knights of Columbus and we were at our provincial meetings. And when I come back, they closed it down because they said it was structurally unsound. And then I found out later on it was something to do with the joists.
So if I understand correctly, or maybe I'm just reading into this, the lightning strike caused damage, but it probably also revealed other damage that had been there before. Is that correct?
That's probably so. Because that church was built in 1868. So it's already 100 years old. So it's going on 150.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I understand what they're going to be doing is before they put the plasterboard or whatever over and everything, they're going to put like some metal beams or something, trusses and joists, to take all the stress off of the bricks.
Mm-hmm.
Because those bricks are over 100 years old, so they're bound to fail eventually.
To get a little brittle or
Right.
whatever.
Although the bricks that were made back then were made to withstand a lot of pressure. I don't think the bricks today could withstand all that church has gone through 3 years. Everything.
So your house is just a couple of doors south of St. Mary's, right?
It is right next door
One
to the
door.
school.
And it's a small double
Right.
cottage. And you said you've been there since you were about a year or two old?
No, I've been there since 62, so I was around about, I'm probably maybe about 12.
And your parents bought that little cottage at that time? And
Not at that time. It was owned by the church at that time, and we were running from the church at that time. It wasn't until I think it was 1970 they come along. The federal government came to the church and said, any property that you own other than what the school, the church, the priest's house, and things like that are on, you are going to have to start to paying property taxes on. So they came to the people that owned, were living in the property at the time, and gave them first chance to buy. And mother and father both were in the service, so they bought it through FHA loan. And that's how I come to get the property.
do you remember how much they paid for it?
Title, tax, and everything, I believe it was $16,004
For the double?
for the double.
Mm-hmm.
Which probably right now I've talked to people and they said you could probably sell that for around about at least about $425,000. But
Wow.
to me, that's home.
What about family? Do you have brothers and sisters?
I don't have anyone. I did have a brother, but he died when he was 15 months old.
And so it was just you?
So it was just me.
How did you entertain yourself back then? What kind? Did you have a lot of neighborhood kids you played with?
We had a lot of neighborhood kids down here back in those days. And I would have friends come over, and we would go down in the basement, shoot pool, do things like that.
Mm-hmm. You've seen it change a lot.
I've seen it change quite a bit. I've seen places change, like there is an office building that's on the corner of 3rd and Frankfurt, which is lawyers. When we moved there in '62, that was a gasoline station.
Mm-hmm.
And then up the street here on 3rd Street, there is I think it's a Remax.
Right, a realty company.
That was a gasoline station when we first moved here. And then on the corner of, I think it's Livingston and 3rd, there is some type of travel agency or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when we moved here, was another gasoline station. It was the Ohio
Mm-hmm.
gasoline station.
I think that was the last one to go out of business, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how all of these gas stations that you and I grew up with are no longer there.
Oh, I know it. And back then, you could get gas for about 50 cents.
And they would probably fill the car for you. If you
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to.
It wasn't any of the self-service. They came out and cleaned your windshield and filled up your gas tank and everything.
Tell me more about 3rd Street. What changes have you seen to particular buildings down 3rd Street over the years?
Well, let's see. You've got uh, down 3rd Street, uh, Max Nerma's has changed a little bit because they've got a bigger kitchen now. That's where the restrooms used to be. And where Max in the first dining area, he had some tables and chairs in there and a pool table.
On that south side of the bar.
Right, on the south side of the bar. And in the back area, that's where he kept his kegs of beer and bottled beer, where the other dining room is. And then even before my time, Mother had told me this, on that side, the bar is the original bar, and it was run by Annie Kaiser. And on the other side was a grocery store. It had nothing to do with the bar.
Your mother remembered all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you go down 3rd Street and you come to, there's a laundromat there. And then Hosford of Haven. Years and years ago, that used to be Schumach's. It was run by Tony Schumach. He was a butcher. And he would cut meats right there. And he had a guy that worked with him. His name was Herbie Brooks. And on down 3rd Street at the corner of 3rd and Whittier, where a restaurant is now called Roosters.
Oh, 3rd and City Park and Whittier.
Yeah, that's right, City Park. That's right, City Park and Whittier. When we moved here, that was called the Seafood Bay. And as soon as you came in the door, there was a big tank with live lobsters in it. You could pick whatever lobster you wanted to have cooked for you.
It seems unusual to have had a fresh seafood restaurant there.
Oh, yeah.
But and I've heard people say it was very good.
Yes, it was. It was very delicious. And then you had Planks, where it's still located at, and that was Willie's place.
It was Roy's place.
Willie
place.
Planks.
Over at South High and
High and Whittier.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another Planks that's on Parsons and Sycamore, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the Planks family also. But John and Tom run that. And Tom Plank graduated with me in '68. So I know Tommy real well.
And then another part of that Planks family was Thurns over here on 3rd Street. And you said you remember it when it was before it was even Thurns.
Yeah, that was the restaurant, or where we had that bakery. That was Reiner's.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, then Thurns.
And now Pistachio
And
Verde.
now it's Pistachio Verde.
What do you remember about it when it was Reiner's? Were they making donuts?
Reiner's, that was the place to go, especially on Saturday morning, to get what they call donut holes. They would make up donuts and everything, but they would make up a lot of donut holes on Saturday mornings. And you had to get there early because everybody flocked there to get the donut holes.
Did they charge you for those?
Yeah, they charged you for them, but it was not that much. I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 cents for each donut hole.
And I would assume you had competition with a lot of kids.
Oh yeah, you had a competition with a lot of kids that wanted to get up there. But another place is also in German Village. A lot of people don't know about is then they know it now as Barcelona's
Right, at Whittier and Jaeger.
Jaeger.
Hmm.
But where it's at, where the entrance is, that it was a like a notion store right there on the corner, and there was also a little pharmacy in the back. And you went down to the front of the building. That's where the entrance was, and that was Dibel's.
So Dival's at that time was only in the eastern portion
Right.
of what is
It was
Barcelona today. It's a
right.
separate building, or was a separate building at one time.
Right. That's where the entrance was. Was down right in front where Barcelona is now and everything. And like I said, it was Dibel's, and the guy that ran it, Blackie, he handed out green carnations to every woman on St. Patrick's Day. Every woman that came in got a green carnation.
And then do you remember when they expanded into the western half of that property?
Probably, not exactly sure. I know it was later on in probably the 70s, I would imagine. I know it was after I had moved from out there. The pharmacy was in the back. The notions were up front. You could go in there and find anything from like cold remedies to notepads or
Like
whatever.
you might in a CVS or
Right.
something today, but on a much smaller scale.
Right, on a smaller scale.
Yeah. Do you remember who ran that pharmacy?
No, I don't know I know it was a gentleman. He was thin, but I never did get his name.
And then also along 3rd Street, you were mentioning what is Katerina today as the saw company.
Right.
What do you remember about them?
Well, Peerless Saw Company. If you had anything like a regular hand saw or a circular saw, that was the place to bring it, to have them check it out to see if they can sharpen the blades and things like this. Or if it was just that they couldn't do anything with it, that you had to get a new blade or something for it.
Did that place occupy just what is Katerina today? Because there's also that little low-slung one-story building just to the south of it,
Yeah.
which I think was part of Peerless too, wasn't it?
It could have been where they had their kept their supplies and things.
Mm-hmm.
But the main building was where Katerina's is at.
Right. And then on the street you were mentioning the travel agency is where the Sohio was. Across the street was is Katzinger's, which has been there a long time, but you probably remember it before it was Katzinger's.
That was really, I think, basically more of like some houses, like places they rented out and everything. Katzinger's didn't come in until I think around about the late 80s or early 90s
Mm-hmm.
and everything.
What about, I've wondered this for a while, where Brown Bag Delicatessen is down at Mohawk and 3rd.
Oh, yeah.
There was a barber shop next to it for a while. What do you remember about the space that is Brown Bag today?
Brown Bag was more of like a mom and pop store. Just like there was like a mom and pop store on the corner of 5th and Sycamore and everything. But that's what the Brown Bag was. And then they finally came in and turned that into like a nice little restaurant
Mm-hmm.
and everything. Now on 3rd Street also, on the corner of Willow, there's G. Michaels. Well, that was a sort of like a bookstore, a guy where he would take in used books to resell. And on the corner, around the corner there on Willow, there was a door that led upstairs, and there was a restaurant up there called the Place Upstairs. Mother and myself went there one time, and I heard a voice, and I know that voice. And it was Kenny Players were in. And this guy was talking double talk. And I turned around and looked, and sure enough, it was Norm Crosby.
Really?
He was here with the Kenny Players. No, I'm not going to ask for autograph or anything to interrupt his meal and everything.
He was a very popular comedian.
Oh, yes, he was.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen any other famous people in the village over the years?
I saw, not in the village, I know that was one. Now, I did go see Red Skelton one time up at the Ohio Theater.
Red Skelton.
Yeah. Now, Mother, that was the second time she saw him. The first time she saw him, I know people don't remember, but it used to be over on the corner of Town and Front. There was Lazarus Annex.
Mm-hmm.
Well, years and years ago, upstairs, that's where they kept their supplies and everything when it was the annex. But that was an auditorium up there. And the seats were like bleachers, but made out of concrete. And she saw him up there.
That was years and years ago.
Oh, that was clear back probably in the 30s, 40s.
Do you know what they called that place then?
I don't know. I think it was just an auditorium. I don't know if it even had a name at that time.
A lot of the buildings around here in the south end of Columbus, especially those that were built by the Germans, had some sort of a fest hall or a meeting hall on the top floor. Do you remember many of those?
Not many, but I do know some of them. And they did have a lot of meeting. Now, like, you've got Schmitz. Now, a lot of people don't know about Schmitz. Right where it's located at now, if you drive around the corner from Schmitz, going close to Jaeger, you will see a condominium.
Schmidthof.
The Schmidthof.
Yeah. That
used to be the slaughterhouse. Many times you'd go past there, and then no silence, and then it'd just be dead silence. But that's where they made all their sausages and everything at the time.
And I believe they owned the space that is now the restaurant and used it pretty much as a warehouse, did they?
Basically, they didn't. The restaurant didn't come into existence until way later, because they just basically, at that time, back in the 50s and 60s, just basically made the sausage and shipped it out.
Did they sell to restaurants or groceries or?
I think they sold it basically to restaurants. And then they finally decided, well, they're going to buy the property, or I don't know, maybe they even owned the property. And they decided to build their own restaurant there.
I had heard also that about the time they decided to go into the restaurant business, that it was about the time the city of Columbus was outlawing slaughterhouses in the city.
Now that could be. That could be the reason why they went into the restaurant business and then moved their warehouse someplace else and built that condo there.
So do you remember going to Schmitz as a youngster to the restaurant?
Not that often, because by that time we had moved to where I'm at now, 720. Now, we did go later on because there was some friends. One of the girls I went to school with, Janice Scanlon, lived on Frankfurt Street. And her sister worked out there, Jeannie Scanlon. And we went out there a few times then. And then you also got the they call it now Old Mohawk. It has had so many names, but I know there's a lot of people that don't know that the first owner of the Mohawk was a gentleman by the name of Miles Elks. And the way I understand, he was real big, and when he sat at the bar, he took up 3 bar stools.
Mm-hmm.
And it took like around about 12 guys to bury him.
Did you know there's still a picture of him in the restaurant, in the back near the restrooms?
Probably is.
And it shows him in a T-shirt sitting on a log. And I had read that he was about 500 pounds.
Yeah. The way I understood, he was very big.
Mm-hmm. Was he a friendly guy?
When my mother told me, said he was very friendly to everybody.
Is he the one who introduced fried turtle and,
Right.
and turtle soup?
That's the next thing was, he went out and bought a lot of turtles. And then he brought them back and put them down in the basement and let them roam free. And then they would mate and everything. And that's how it came to be that he could state that he had fresh fried turtle and fresh turtle soup. Because they would just go down and get a turtle and clean it. And you had fresh turtle.
And I guess that was pretty popular then.
Well, back then, yes, that was very popular. Because nobody else could make that claim.
Mm-hmm. What about the food that you ate at home with your mother? What kinds of meals did you have with your mother and father?
It varied. Mother didn't. She finally got on to cooking, but Father Roy did a lot of the cooking, and he taught her how to cook. Because my father, he was a cook in the army.
Oh.
So he knew how to cook. And the way I understood it from my parents, when they first met, she couldn't even boil water without scalding it. And I learned from Father how to cook.
What did he cook? What did he like to cook best?
Meatloaves. Meatloaf or meatballs. I know this one year, Mother went and got, I think it was something like about 5 pounds of hamburger. And she said she wanted meatballs. And then she went, and when she went to the store, when she come down, she found out that she had to go to the hospital. And she had a hairline fracture of the elbow. Well, in the meantime, she wanted it for meatballs and meatloaf, but she just said meatballs. So my father and myself, we made 5 pounds of meatballs. We had every pot in the house going with meatballs. And she gave meatballs to everybody, just about everybody in the village.
When she came home from the hospital?
Right. Her mouth dropped like, what? But she couldn't say anything.
Because she had asked for
That's exactly
meatballs.
what she asked for. Everything. But my father, he would meatloaf, meatballs. He wasn't that much on grilling. Now I'm into grilling outside. I grill all winter, summer. It could be 30 degrees outside, and I'll be outside in a T-shirt just grilling.
And you've done that for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Well, what do you grill?
Oh, I'll grill a steak or bratwurst, chicken breast. I've even done fish on the grill. So it just depends on what I feel like.
Now, your last name Shooter. What ethnicity or what country does that go back to?
Well, I am Irish German because on my father's side, the name Shooter, the original way it was spelt was SCHOOTTER. E-R.
Hmm.
And on mother's side, her parents' last name was Fisher. But now on her mother maiden name was Dorn. That's where the Irish comes out.
Hmm.
So I'm Irish German.
Is that kind of unusual, an Irish German person?
Not really.
No.
Not for down here.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of Irish Germans down here in the village.
And most of them are Catholic.
Right. Because really, your first church was, I think, we were the third one. I think the first church was Holy Cross, and I think the second church was St. Patrick's. So you've had a lot of Irish Germans down here.
I've heard the story that there got to be so many German Catholics, and they were tired of walking as far as they had to walk on a Sunday to get to services, that they finally said, we need our own our own church, our own parish here. We can support it. We have enough.
Well, that's just like my next door neighbor, Diane Sauer. She had a friend, and he did a genealogical study on her house. When I called and looked it up online for mine in the city, it says old.
Hmm.
But she had a friend, and he went way back. I don't know how he does it, but he went back to the first owner of hers, and that was built in 1858.
Your neighbors.
Right. And the Spec Center, which is behind the church, that was the first school, the first church, and the priests lived upstairs. That was built in 1865. And then the older school building that the guy just bought, I think it was built in 1887.
And that has since been turned into a private home.
Right.
Here about 2 or 3 years ago.
About two or 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
And so I figure mine is probably right around about 1861, maybe 63.
Mm-hmm. And I would just, I've always heard that the older homes are generally here in the northern part of the village. The newer homes are generally toward the south, down around the park,
Right.
where people later lived, as they either grew up in their parents' home and wanted to go out on their own, or perhaps they had a little bit more money than the previous generation. They were able to build a little farther south.
Well, that's another reason why you don't have that many kids living down here in the village anymore. And when I went to school, you had kids galore that lived down here and went to school. And right now, there's not that many that live in the village. Most have grown and moved out of the village and started their own families, and now maybe live out in different suburbs. And their kids go to school there.
Mm-hmm. When did you see the change happening? Was it all through the 60s, when there were fewer and fewer children here and more young couples and older couples?
Basically, it started changing into, I would say, like maybe the late 70s into the 80s.
That late? Mm-hmm.
You still had a lot of kids that still lived down here in the 60s and everything.
But then toward the 70s and 80s, homes were being restored.
Right.
They were becoming a little more expensive, and perhaps a little too expensive for some young couples.
A lot of people, the older people were possibly passing on, and then the family were selling the houses, and there were a lot of big corporations or conglomerates buying houses down here. Speculating. Because the village was, at that time then, starting to grow and everything. See, I think it was in the 70s when everything started popping with the village of starting the growth and all this and
The
everything.
renovations, the
And the renovation,
restorations.
all that and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they first started doing this German village sell, people were selling like this I forget now what to call it. It's white glass.
Porcelain? Or
No, it's not porcelain. It's white, and it's I forget the name of it. It's a very important glass, and they were selling them for 25 cents. Well, people were buying those up and then reselling them for like $25, $50.
Hmm.
Milk glass.
I was about to say milk glass.
That's it, milk glass.
Mm-hmm.
And people down here, the old time village, the German village people, they didn't know what they had. And then finally they caught on, and then finally it went to selling stuff, but basically like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And that milk glass was nowhere to be found anymore.
There's been talk, and there's been a lot of back and forth about what the neighborhood looked like in the 50s and early part of the 60s. Some people say it was in awful shape. Others have said, well, there were parts of it that weren't so nice, but for the most part, it was a comfortable little working class neighborhood. Is that the German village you remember of your childhood?
Most of it was of what you would say of houses needing to be restored and everything. That was the main thing of getting things restored. It was a nice little community to live in, yes. But if you wanted something that was real nice and everything to look at and everything, German Village needed a lot of work back then to get to the way it looks now. There are still some places that need repair, and I can understand a lot of them are owned by the older people, and they cannot afford to do the renovations that a lot of younger people can. But all in all, it is a very good community, and it's a safe community. Other than this last little bit we had here, on 3rd Street it's well lit, and you don't have what you'd say crime that much at all down here. It's usually when you have crime is on the side streets and everything. But basically right in the heart of German Village, no. Not until, like I said, this last little stint, but I think that's over with now.
When we had a gentleman who was attacking women, attacked 2 or 3
Right.
women, and understandably made for some very tense people down here,
Right.
tense situations. But I agree with you. I don't see that much, and in the way of crime. And when you do hear about crime in German Village, I think it's because it is unusual.
Right.
If we had much crime, you wouldn't hear the news of it as much.
You probably wouldn't. And since that guy was caught that killed that young lady, all this attacking and everything has stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they got the guy that did all this attacking here in the village.
Mm-hmm. But you always felt safe as a kid. And your parents never had any problem with you
Oh, no.
staying out after dark and whatever.
No,
Did you play a lot in the park, in Schiller Park?
not that much. I did when we lived on Ebner Street, and there is a nice big hill, but it has gone way down from the way it used to be. But the park is a nice place to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made it much safer now down there. with all the different lights that they've put up in the park.
Hmm.
Back when I went there, you had to have parents with you because it was not that well lit at nights. And they finally did eventually get the lighting system and everything that they have now to make it safer for people to walk through the park.
And of course, again, the period of time you would have been there would have been early and mid 60s, right?
Probably,
Or even earlier than that.
probably around about the last part of the 50s.
That's right, because you said you were on Ebner. You hadn't
Right.
moved here yet. Yeah. What did your father do for a living?
My father, at one time, he worked for the city. And then at the end, he worked for the Franklin County Engineers. And he worked out on the roads, and he was one of the ones that would be out there salting the county roads when we got snow and ice.
And do you remember the winters being harsher when you were little?
A little bit more than what we do now. Because back, now I don't remember this one, because I was only 1 year old at the time. And that was in 50, the Snow Bowl and everything.
The famous football game.
Yeah, famous football game. But most of the winters after that, we have had some bad winters. But then we got out of what you would call the snow belt, and we don't get that much snow anymore. All the meteorologists, they try to make it sound worse than what it is when they say there's a lot of snow coming.
Hmm.
And I just say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Now, that was your dad working for the engineer's office. Your mom, did she ever work outside the home?
She worked out of the home all the time. At first, she worked for clerk of courts. So if the Democrats went in, she went in. If the Republicans went in, she was out. And she used to work up in the old courthouse when they finally tore that down.
Now, where was that, Mike?
The old courthouse was on High Street, right there in between Fulton and Mound.
Okay.
Because on the corner of Fulton and High was the annex, courthouse annex.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was an older brick building which was big. That was the courthouse. And she worked there. And that's where they had all the courtrooms and everything at that time.
Would she drive to work? Would she walk to work from here?
She had friends that would pick her up. She never did drive either.
So your father did he drive?
My father did drive and everything when he worked for the city. And then he finally quit driving and started getting rides to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never drove in my life.
You've never driven?
Nope.
Never had to?
Well, we got down here and I've got everything centrally located. So I can go up and catch the bus and ride the bus to work, or I could walk to work. Because I worked at Lazarus, when it was F&R Lazarus. I worked there. And I also worked over at the city center for Marshall Fields, and then when it became, Kaufman's, and then back to Macy's.
And what did you do there?
I worked on the receiving dock, receiving merchandise in or transporting it out.
So that's the type of work you've done most of your life, and right downtown.
Right. I've been in retail. I was in retail for like around about 32 and a half, 33 years. I had went through a lot of different trade schools, but nothing ever panned out for me. So I guess I was meant to work in retail.
As a kid, did you have odd jobs around the neighborhood?
Not so much odd jobs like a lot of the kids. They had new uh, paper routes and things like that. My job basically was just to keep the house straightened and everything. And back in those days, not like, well, you wouldn't trust kid today on it, but I was trusted with like anywhere from maybe $500 to $900 to go pay bills. That I would go and pay the different bills while my parents worked.
So for utilities and
Yeah, utilities, gas, the phone, the electric.
how would you do that? Would you go by bus to these
Right.
various places?
I would catch a bus and go uptown and then walk to one and walk to the next one and then to the next one.
Would you take checks or cash?
I would have cash on me.
Cash, which they probably don't even take today in a
No.
lot of these places.
And right now, most of it's done online anyhow.
Have you adapted to that pretty well to
Oh,
the
yeah.
online world? Are you on the net, on the web a lot?
Oh yeah, most of all my bills I pay not directly to them, but I pay to send it off to my bank, and then my bank turns around and sends it to them. So if there is any problems, they cannot get into my computer.
Mm-hmm.
They can get into the bank's computer, but not mine.
As a kid, would you have ever imagined that it would get to this?
No, I would never even thought about a computer back then. Because when I went to school, we weren't even allowed to use calculators. We had to do everything in our head of mathematical problems and everything.
Do you feel you got a pretty good education through the
Oh,
through
yes.
the St. Mary's School?
Through St. Mary's, yeah, Catholic education. To me, Catholic education is still the best education that you can get out there.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, you not only get your education, but then you also get the Catholic background to make you a better citizen and a better person.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them that get education and everything, but they don't get that firm background and everything. And then they may go off in another area that is not suitable for today's society.
Teachers, were they all nuns for you, or were there some men who taught you as well?
We had, I think when I was in grade school, we had 2 lay teachers, 2 ladies. And then when I went to high school, they were basically nuns, and we had, I think, 1 woman and 2 men. I think we had 3 when I went to high school.
Did you ever rub any of your teachers the wrong way so that they got the ruler out?
No, I never had that problem, but I did have an instance. It was back in the, I think probably about 66, 67. That's when they came out with what they called these surfers crosses. And I had one on, and this one male teacher we had, he also taught gym. And I had it hanging out, and he grabbed hold of it, and it was like the Maltese cross. He said, "This is supposed to be worn inside your," and jerked at it. It came off in his hand. But then when mother called about it, he said, well, it fell off in his hand. All the students told me, said, one of my friends said, he yanked that off of you.
So this was a cross that was not the style of cross that they would have preferred you to,
No.
to wear.
If he would have just said, put it inside your shirt,
Mm-hmm.
I would have done that. But then he turned around and yanked it off of me.
Did you patch things up with him over time?
I never had any problems with him, and then he did after Mom called him and everything. The next day, he apologized to me and gave me the cross back.
Do you remember any other specific instances down here where that just things that just have stuck with you over years and years and years? Little things that we wouldn't think about today.
Just basically, not really that much. It's just that anymore you don't have the amount of kids in this area anymore. But and traffic-wise, it's got a little bit worse. But it's still basically German village, and it's still a nice place to live. And there are a lot of buildings that are around. Like I know there's one. Mother had a chance to buy this building probably back in the 30s for $5,000. Well, that's probably maybe like about back then was probably maybe around about $5 million. And it's a double, and it's on the corner of City Park and Casa.
I know the one.
It's a big double.
Mm-hmm. Just up the street from
Yeah,
there.
real big, constructed and everything. She had a chance to buy that for $5,000.
Tell me, one of the things that stands out in my mind about you is something you do every December. Could you explain that and tell us how that got started?
Oh, you're talking about the nativity scene. Yeah, the nativity scene, how it got started was when we lived on Ebner Street. Mother had a nativity scene, and they were small figures, maybe about 9-10 inches high, if that much. And I found them one year in the attic, was going to put them out, and I asked her why she never put them out, and she said she was afraid that somebody would steal them. Well, by this time, everything now is like 22 inches high, and they looked out of place. So after that first year, I had to go and start from scratch. And I got the manger scene, and the first year I had Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus in the scene, and I had the 3 wise men riding on one camel. I had one camel. And then the next year, I got 2 more camels. And I just kept putting more together to the point where now it's all that, and also a shepherd with lambs, a donkey, a cow. And at first I had that in my rental, in the backyard of my rental. And that's when Frank Carrig, he started selling Christmas trees over in front of the school. So I had to do something, so I started putting it out in front. And it's just become a scene that everybody asks me, are you going to be putting it up?
They come to expect it every year.
Right. I was over at Max Nirma's in November, and it was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. There was a couple guys over there saying, are you going to put that nativity scene up this year? I said, yes, it'll be up. And a lot of people are afraid. They said, well, aren't you afraid that somebody's going to take all that and steal it? Not really, because one thing is, it's right underneath the light, the street light there. It's right on the main drag of 3rd Street. And everything is wired to the tables itself and also to the bricks, because I have little U-nails which I run wire to, and then into pieces next to it, maybe 3 pieces down. So if somebody goes to undo it, they're going to get tired and say, the heck with it. And who walks around with a pair of wire cutters in their pocket?
So you've never had any real problem with
No.
that. And what was your first year to do it?
I think my first year of doing it in the back probably was, I can't even remember now. It had to be, because it's been out front. Matter of fact, a guy that came over to the Christmas tree sale this year, he showed me a picture that a friend of his sent him, the nativity scene, and it was the bartender from the Mohawk, and sent him a note saying, this has been here for the last 40 years. So it's been out in front for the last 40.
40. And then in the backyard?
In the
sometime before
backyard,
that?
probably, I would imagine, say, 4 or 5 years before that.
How long do you think you'll keep doing it?
As long as I can get it up each year. And
Well, it has come to mean Christmas up and down
Oh,
3rd
yeah.
Street, that's for sure.
everybody, especially on the village lights night, everybody is taking pictures of that. I know one year I came back from working the tree sale, and some people come to take pictures, and it was, I think it was about a couple years ago. It was nice, so I just came out in a t-shirt because they wanted me to be in the picture with them and everything. But I've been doing that for 40 years. And just, even when I was working at Marshall Field, I even had my coworkers ask me if I was going to put it up. So it just got around to everybody.
That's great. I need to wrap this up because I've kept you here for about an hour, but any final thing to say about your home, about German Village?
German Village, I really and truthfully think German Village is going to grow more and everything. And I look for a lot of different other businesses to come in here. But I think they're going to be taking Coda, number 8 off of 3rd Street here and everything. But you got other businesses coming, like I said, other business coming in. So I don't know really what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a lot better. And property down here is so outrageous and everything. The people that got in early and got property down here, they're okay, because the amount, I had a tenant one time, they wanted to stay down here because she works up at Pistachio Verde. And they went around looking, and rent or to buy a place down here ranges anywhere from about $475,000 to about 1.8 mil. So it's very costly down here.
And then you have the taxes on top of all that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're certainly glad to have you here.
well, I'm glad to be here, and I keep trying to put out whatever I can about different things that I know.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you being here today.
Nice meet Take care, John.
All right. Thank you.